Hello and welcome to Alyssa Jean's Reviews, and welcome to my review for Star Trek Lower Decks Season 4 Episode 10, Old Friends, New Planets. This is, of course, the finale. Sadly, we have gone through yet another season of Lower Decks. It's over already. It seems to go by so quickly. I will start with the usual spoiler warning. Obviously, you wouldn't watch this video without having first seen the episode. So, this was another strong finale. I would say that Lower Decks does have kind of a formula for the finale, and this fit right in. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think you find something that works, you stick with it. But it's different every year. It's not like it's the same episode, but it's definitely a similar formula where they revert more to a typical Star Trek episode rather than a comedy, rather than a parody. In fact, there is one particular Star Trek trope that I often complain about that they just flat out did in this episode without actually parodying it. And I'm okay with it. I'll get to that a little later in more detail. It doesn't bother me, but I find it indicative of the finales that they do straight up Star Trek episodes rather than a comedy and parody. I mean, there's always elements of comedy and parody in it, but it is more like an action-packed, straight up Star Trek story. And that's typical of the finales. Also, there's always an element of, as Talen puts it in this episode, Cerritos strong. At least with the last three finales, I'm thinking back to the one a couple seasons ago where they all go out there and they take all the panels off the ship. This element of the crew coming together, which I really like. This one was a little more subtle than the previous 2 years, but it was there. So that's always an element. And this one, I think, more than other finales, really wraps up the season, puts a little bow on it, brings back elements from all throughout the season, characters from all throughout the season, including one scene that they brought back that I didn't love when they did it the first time, but actually was okay with it this time, and I'll get into that in more detail later. So they did a nice little job of wrapping up the season. I would say, though, when I think about whether this finale was worth virtually every single episode, taking time out of its airtime to have that little ship come in and wipe away some alien races, like it was in almost every single episode. I believe every episode, but 2 through the first 8 featured an element of that. And was this finale, was this worth that? And I would say, yeah. I mean, it wasn't bad, but I don't know if it kind of lived up to every single episode having a scene about it in there. But as per usual, Lower Decks, great character stories. Every character had a moment to shine. Even Boimler, who I feel has been brushed aside largely in season 4. He only got one episode where he had his own story, and this is disappointing after the bold Boimler storyline in season 3, which was great. He had that, I believe it was the second episode where he was leading the away team, and after that he was kind of the star of the B-plots. He was like in every B-plot, but he gets a moment to shine here, as do pretty much every character. Maybe not Rutherford as much, but Rutherford did too. Yeah. So that's good. This is a very typical but very strong finale for Lower Decks. I'm not sure exactly where it ranks among finales. I would have to kind of look at them again. I know I just did rewatches of the previous seasons, but to compare and contrast, I would say is probably one of the stronger ones. I don't know. It was a strong finale. Okay, so let me go ahead and get into a few of the details as much as I have time for. So let's go ahead and get into that. All right, so the episode opens with a flashback to Starfleet Academy. This was really, really huge for me to see. Not just because we have Shannon Phil, I believe her name is, coming back to play Cedo, which is something we never thought we would see, so that was great. And of course, Will Wheaton getting to be Wesley and not some goofy, weird traveler Wesley that didn't make any sense. But actually, Wesley in Starfleet Academy. I'm sure we'll hear about it on the Ready Room. He doesn't do Ready Rooms every week for Lower Decks. He usually only does 1 or 2 a year. I don't even know if he did any this year. Anyways. That was great, but that's not why I really needed to see this scene. I really needed this scene because I needed to visualize this retcon that he introduced us to the previous week, which is that Mariner somehow existed in this storyline with Cedo and Nick Locarno, and I needed to see that. And so this really helped me with that retcon to actually see a young, like, excitable Mariner, kind of very Tendy-like in her excitement level. Very cute. But you can see the dynamics that those characters had. And that kind of gave me a new point of view on the next scene, which I had seen already because they released it as a sneak peek scene. That's the scene where we go back to the present day and Mariner is confronting Nick, and she says, "But I hardly knew you." And I had seen that already in the sneak peek scene, but seeing it now again after the flashback and actually seeing the kind of dynamics that they had, where she was just this little first year cadet, running around and following them and worshiping them, and Nick Locarno was just going like, "Get away, you first year cadet." Kind of seeing that gave me a new perspective on that scene, which I had, seen previously as a sneak peek. So that was good. I was really glad that they did that. And then Nick Locarno reveals his evil plan to everyone in the Alpha Quadrant. And then we get that Tom Paris joke that I needed. Like I had said last week, they gotta do a Tom Paris. How could they not? How can they not do the Tom Paris joke? There's no way they could go through this episode. In fact, I would deduct a full point off of my rating if they didn't do a Tom Paris joke. They have to. And they did. They did not disappoint me. So we have Rutherford going, "He looks just like Tom Paris." And Boimler's like, "No, I don't see it." And then more things happen, and they're discussing, "Oh, we gotta stop Nick Locarno, blah blah blah," and then Rutherford just randomly says, "No, he has the same face," and Boimler is like, "Yeah, I'm just not seeing it." Yes, you have to do that. There's no way you couldn't do that. So, kudos to you, Lower Decks. I love that. Then we get the reveal of the evil plan, and he's like, "Oh, here's Mariner on my side." And I am glad that this is the direction they went. I'm glad they didn't have Mariner do the whole face of the enemy thing and like pretend to be on his side, and then have Freeman and everybody go, "Oh no, Mariner's betrayed us." I was like hoping they wouldn't do that. So Mariner instead goes, "This guy sucks!" and like runs off with the Genesis, which is more in character for Mariner. I have a hard time seeing Mariner like playing along with that, and because she's not good at that kind of thing. She was just like, "Yeah, sure, this is great." Yeah, it's like that's Mariner. Like, so she was totally in character with that. And that leads us to the main thrust of the action of this episode, with Mariner and Locarno eventually getting involved in a Wrath of Khan-esque chase through a storm, not through a nebula, but a very similar looking type of deal. So that was good. This is interesting because this season had the poster of Star Trek 4, because every season of Lower Decks, like their poster is a different Star Trek film when they go in order. And so this one was Star Trek 4, even though it ends kind of Star Trek 2-esque a little bit. And even has the Genesis in it. So, but I digress. So here's where we get into like the Star Trek trope that I often complain about, that they just flat out did instead of parodying. And I'm not complaining. It's just, at this point I'm like throwing my hands in the air. It's like, this is Star Trek. They're always going to do this. And that, of course, is the Admiral ordering them to not go help their friends. And, of course, the captain defies the order and even makes a big announcement saying, hey, everybody, I am defying orders, and I'm going to go and rescue Mariner. You don't have to stand with me. Part of me was almost like, are they going to try to defy this trope and have people go, no, we're not doing that? But that wouldn't really work for the story. So, very, very typical. And then, of course, a little slap on the wrist. Like, well, things turned out well, so we're not going to punish you for blatantly disobeying orders. That is like a classic Star Trek trope. Usually I complain about it. It bothers me. For some reason here in Lower Decks, it just is not bothering me because it's like, whatever. It's a Star Trek thing. But it's interesting that they didn't make fun of it. They just did it. So, but yeah, I'm not actually complaining about that. Now, of course, this is where we get a lot of callbacks to previous episodes in the season. When Freeman's making that call, we even see Googie. I wasn't sure who that was Googie was hanging out with. I didn't recognize that character. But Googie doesn't have any lines. He's just kind of there. And then we get the return of Livik. Like, Livik. And then we get the scene, there was a reprise of the scene that I hated with the Mark Twain thing. But here's the thing. The reason why I really hated that scene previously, why it really kind of didn't work for me, is that it was a bridge too far for me to bring in that alien captain to put on the Twain outfit and go along. Like, why would he go along with that? I mean, I thought that was a little too ridiculous even for Lower Decks, and I give Lower Decks a lot of leeway, but that was asking too much of me to think that would actually happen, and I just found it to be really dumb, and it kind of ruined the scene for me. But here with Livik and Rutherford doing it, it also was very brief. It wasn't really drawn out or anything. I have to admit, I gave a little chuckle at because it's just so silly. It's so ridiculous. So I was okay with it here. It's fine. Just don't ever bring this gag back again. I don't think they will, because I think this is a season 4 thing. I don't think that they'll bring it back for season 5. They tend to keep things like this contained to a singular season. So whatever. it's fine. And then we also return to Orion and get to see Tendy's sister again. And I did kind of like that Tendy picked Migliamoo as the champion. He's like, what? Everybody's like, what? And I'm like, what is Tendy going for here? And she has him puff up to cause allergies for the big giant Orion woman, but unfortunately she falls right on top of him and is declared the winner, and now Tendy has to bargain herself, which ends up leading to kind of a cliffhanger a little bit, and this is actually the second time where we've ended a season with one of the characters going off on a different ship. This has happened to Boimler at the season 1 finale. Of course, only took him a couple episodes to get back to the Cerritos. I imagine it'll be similar for Tendy. We need her back on the Cerritos. There's no way we can have a whole season with her not on the Cerritos. It almost seemed like at the end they kind of they were forgetting about that. Like at least the crew members were, our lower deckers were acting like, oh, let's all get drunk and let's all hang out. Like, don't you remember Tendy's gonna go to the Rains now? It seems like maybe they weren't expecting it to happen that fast, but I was. So we get that. I'm kind of jumping all over the place here. But yeah, the Ryan episode was actually the one I think I gave the lowest rating to, because I felt like we had already gotten all of that Tendi character development, and I think it really contributed a lot of new things. And I was not a huge fan of her getting the Billup storyline where she's secretly royalty. But here, I'm okay with it. Like, we've already kind of been through that phase of like, well, I don't love this. But this worked for this particular storyline. And I did enjoy the whole Migliaboo thing. And not going with expectations, kind of going against expectations by actually having Migliaboo lose, but they still get that ship anyway. And I love the creativity. Again, I love the theme that Freeman is a good captain. I love that they've made her into a smart captain and good captain. I wonder if this is building to her eventually getting a promotion, either to admiral or getting a better starship or whatever by the end of the series. I wonder how many seasons we got left, because they're also building toward Boimler getting promoted and moving up the ladder, because we get a great scene where Boimler gets to be captain. He's like, I'm using my captain voice, and like that was great. And then at the end, Mariner's like, oh, this is totally not going to your head or anything. So Boimler got a great moment. Of course, Tendi got a few great moments. I think Rutherford's moments came with the Livick thing and all that. And maybe he didn't get as much moments as the other characters. Mariner, of course, we're wrapping up her story arc here. She is realizing, Starfleet is good. Like, she has the whole speech with Locarno about, they're not perfect, but Starfleet always does what it believes is right. And Mariner kind of coming to terms with Starfleet. And I have a feeling that other people will say, well, she's already done that. I don't think she really has, though. I really don't. So I thought this was a nice wrap up to Mariner's story arc. And then I kind of liked the ending for Locarno, where he was so confident that he could disarm the bomb, but the Ferengi's had put a please deposit 2 gold pressed platinum bars to deactivate the bomb, and boom goes Nick Locarno, and he becomes a part of that planet. I hope they don't do some weird thing where he's like comes back to life on the planet or something like Spock. I think this is a good ending for this character's arc, 2-episode arc as it is. Really one, because he just appeared at the end of the previous one. Anyways, I feel like I'm just sort of rambling and all over the place. So let me go ahead and wrap this up and give my rating out of 10 for this episode and last week's episode, because I do owe you a rating for last week's episode. I promised, so I will give that to you first, and then I'll give you my rating for this week's episode. Okay, so let's do last week's episode first. The Inner Fight. I wanted to wait till this week to give it a rating out of 10, and I'm glad I did, because it gave me time to reflect on it a little more, and also put it in context with this week's episode. So with that, I'm going to do something that I said that I most likely was not going to do at the end of last week's review. My rating out of 10 for Season 4, Episode 9, The Inner Fight, is a 10. I've decided to give this a 10. I said I was leaning 8 to 9 and probably wouldn't go 10. But the more I thought about it, the more I think this was a really great episode of Lower Decks. And I was kind of hung up on, I don't know how I feel about the retcon. I don't know completely how I feel about Mariner's story arc. And then I saw Jessie Gender's review. She put her review out a week late, and she was like, fuck that. I don't care what anyone says. This is a great story arc for Mariner. I don't care what anyone says. This is a great story with Cito being brought in there. And it kind of reaffirmed for me that no, I forget what anyone else says. Those were both great things. And it was a very touching moment that Mariner shared with the I never remember his name, but the Klingon captain from Wage Douche, and a really satisfying reveal to the previous story arc. All of that. I'm going to give this a 10. I will admit that I'm giving it a 10 in part because if I didn't, I wouldn't have given any episode in season 4 a 10. Spoiler alert for the rating that I'm going to give for this week's episode is not a 10. So I went ahead and pulled the trigger. I think it's a weaker 10 than episodes like Crisis Point or Here All Trust Nothing. But that's only because, 10 is the cap. Like, I would give those episodes like a 20 or a 30 if I could, but 10's the cap. So, but this is like a true 10, and the other ones would be higher than a 10 if I allowed myself to do higher than a 10. So, I also just want to say before I give my rating for episode 10, I'm retroactively giving episode 5, which was in Pathological Fallacies, the T'Lyn episode. I believe I gave it an 8.5. Let's give that a 9. I think that was a 9. So there's a few 9s in this season. I think a pretty solid season overall, though I didn't get any Here I'll Trust Nothing or Crisis Point or I Excretus or even Wage Douche this year, but a pretty solid season overall. Anyways, I do need to give my rating for this week's episode. So my rating for season 4, episode 10, Old Friends, New Planets, is a 9. So I thought this was a very solid, very strong finale. I think I wanted to give it a 10, but it just didn't quite satisfy the need to have every single episode take some airtime, to have a little scene about that ship that was Nick Locarno's ship. I don't know if I just felt like this finale warranted all of that quite, but again, a very strong finale, satisfying in a lot of ways, wraps up some character stories. Every character gets a good moment. You, of course, have your Cerritos strong moment, all of the stuff that a Lower Decks finale should have, so I'll give it a 9 out of 10. All right, thank you so much for watching. That does it for my coverage of Lower Decks on this channel. I will be doing a discussion with my brother Mark from Enchantment of Eternity. I want to say that we said Monday the 6th of November. I'm going to say 6 p.m. West Coast time. And I'm not sure if we decided whose channel this was going to be on, but stay tuned to both of our channels for more information on that as he and I will discuss Lower Decks Season 4. All right, everybody, thank you for joining me. I will see you soon. Goodbye.